All right. What is going on, guys? Vertivoden here, and the Exasperated Gentlemen are back for this gaming life. I almost forgot the title of our YouTube channel. I'm so tired. It's Friday. We both had these like crazy ass weeks. We actually had to skip last week because drummer Mike here had how many teeth extracted from your skull?
Four wisdom teeth.
Four wisdom teeth that were impacted under the gums, so he had to actually get oral surgery done. I unfortunately have had to experience that as well, so I understand how grueling that was. And I did this not being married and having three kids and a full-time career. So I got to imagine that these last couple of weeks have been hard for you.
Well, my wife, she's a rock star. So she didn't she took the kids and really I was only on painkillers the day of the surgery, but after that it was just ibuprofen. So it wasn't terrible. The nuisance has been like like not the incisions, but like my palate and my other teeth has really been the pain in the butt.
What do you mean?
But we're back, and I think we've missed 2 weeks, to be honest with you, because the week before that,
Oh shit, that's right.
I had had something I had to attend to, but yeah, no, we're back, and I think we're trying out Friday night to see how that works for us because Friday may work out to be better actually for both of us.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think a lot of you have, you've seen the news or whatever, like with COVID lockdowns, easing up here, there is this sort of a mass need for blue collar workers, and there is a massive deficit due to a lot of different factors. But I think one of them is that a lot of those jobs are fucking grueling and they don't pay enough. And after people like in a pandemic kind of went like, well, maybe I don't want to go back to that shit job that stressed me out. Maybe I gotta wait for something else. And with my job in particular, there was already a growing deficit apparently for like 30 years of truck drivers. And so the overtime that I am getting now is almost daily. I have to actually tell my boss to, like, hey, we gotta rein this in a little bit. Like, I like overtime, but I mean, money doesn't actually buy you time. So we thought maybe moving it to Friday would be a little bit easier for both of us, and I think that might be the case.
Yeah, we'll continue to tinker. You know, we're still new at this and still kind of trying to figure everything out.
Yeah, and I
But
mean,
we'll get into a routine.
yeah, we'll see what happens. But so this is something I want to do, and I'm kind of spraying this on you, big guy, and I apologize for this, but not really. So, the podcast, when you and I talked about it, we called it This Gaming Life, and we wanted to talk about our lives, as gamers, not just games, not just like our experiences, not just our opinions, but like, how gaming interplays with our life and how life is affected by it or vice versa or whatever. So I'm going to put you on the spot, and I'm going to ask you, so these last 2 weeks, you are married. How long you been married?
8.5 years.
8.5 years. Damn, that's longer than me. And you've got three kids, newborn baby
Yes.
boy, right?
Well, he's coming up on 1.5 now, so he's
Oh
not
shit,
quite a
it's been that
newborn.
long.
So
God, that like flew.
yeah,
Well, it
it's
flew
been a
by for
long
me.
time.
So so what are the, if you don't mind me asking, what are the ages of your kids?
So my oldest son, he just turned 5 a month ago. My daughter is about to, well, she's turned 4 in August.
Yeah.
She's not about to turn 4. And then my youngest is a year and a half. So with kids, the days are long, but the years are short.
Yeah. So in the last 2 weeks, then, with three kids, a wife, a full-time career, and having four wisdom teeth extracted from your head, how, like, have you been able to game? And I mean, not just like stream your gaming, because I know you've been really good with that and diligent, but like, have you been able to enjoy gaming in the last couple of weeks with all this going on?
Um, that's a loaded question.
I know.
Um,
That's,
I th- I think most of the stuff that I've been doing with gaming has been actually switching things over to my new computer. So one of the things that I needed to do was I had before I got my new computer and I was streaming, I was using the my streaming rig now as also my gaming PC, and I had a Skyrim load order of 366 mods and about 20 hours into the game. Hadn't crashed once,
holy
which I was
shit.
really proud of myself.
Wow.
Um, but now and I was streaming it, and so one of the challenges was, okay, I need to perfectly transfer over this load order from my old machine to my new machine and all of my save data to my new machine. So when I stream, I can basically pick up without a pitch.
Wow.
Um, and obviously, everyone knows how catastrophic it is to remove mods mid playthrough, especially when you start when you have so the way Bethesda save games work is when you mod the game, your game will, as that one save file gets older and older into your playthrough, it will become more and more unstable. That's
Right.
just the way that it is. It doesn't
Right.
matter if you have the perfect load order or not. Especially with the more mods you have, the worse that will be.
Oh yeah.
So the so essentially, I had to kind of copy and paste what was on my old computer onto my new computer, which was a little, time intensive. Thankfully, I had all the mods that I didn't have to download my mods again because I always keep my mods in the order that I have them on a external hard drive. So all I have to do is pop them into Mod Organizer and hit,
Yeah.
install, and I have them numbered. So even if something were to happen, I could go onto somebody else's computer, install Mod Organizer, and give them my exact load order, and it would work for them just fine.
Okay.
So that made it a lot easier, but it takes some save game surgery to get it to work.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't know how to do that until a couple of weeks ago. I had to research it. Just kind of how you can tinker around with your save games, especially if you want to remove mods, and how you can go back and change the data in your save game to make sure it doesn't screw things up.
Yeah.
And so once I finished that, then obviously, I wanted to move on to my Fallout load order, which is just about done. But other than that, I mean, that's pretty much been my gaming for the past couple of weeks. So it hasn't really been playing games as much unless I was streaming. But as for those of you that, come to my streams were having significant issues. So then part of it was also, messing around with OBS, switching from Streamlabs to OBS and getting all those settings taken care of. So it's really been a lot more behind the scenes over the past 2 weeks and a lot less playing games. So I can't really sit and test, and then obviously testing. So Skyrim, I needed to test Skyrim pretty extensively before I was willing to stream it.
Right.
And saying, is this stable? Is this even going to work?
I never had that issue.
Thankfully it did.
Yeah.
And I've streamed it a couple times and I still haven't crashed. So I'm almost 30 hours in and switching save files to another machine and moving it, and I still haven't crashed, knock on wood.
Yeah. Nice.
But that's really been, it's been more of a labor of love as opposed to enjoying game. It's the colonoscopy of gaming has been the past 2 weeks.
What an image. The colonoscopy of gaming. Wow.
On the flip side, I was able to get a graphical load order going since I kind of had some time off work and all that stuff. I was able to get a graphical load order for Kingdom Come Deliverance, and and I'm going to put out a tutorial on how to download, EMBs and reshade for Kingdom Come Deliverance. It actually works pretty similarly to Bethesda games, which makes things actually really simple.
Yeah.
But it got to the point where my GTX 3090 and 11900 CPU was only getting 30 frames per second.
on Kingdom Come?
Yeah.
Okay. No, I mean,
But
it's,
it looked great.
I'm like,
It
it's a
was
pretty GPU heavy game even when it came out. So I gotta imagine if you're modding that to look even better, it's yeah, you're gonna need you're gonna be pushing any GPU.
yeah, but it looked really good. So but really you know, it's I kind of but as far as gaming, sorry if I'm being long-winded here, but I
How
kind of
dare you?
think I think about I just, you know, my life is concentric circles. You know, meaning
Meaning
there's
what?
a this meaning this that the, you know, my priorities start at the center and then ripple out almost like a, you know, an earthquake with its seismic activity. And
Loving
so
the imagery.
gaming, you know, real life comes first, and you know, I want to do right by the you know, community that I'm trying to build. I want to do right by everyone out there, but obviously my wife comes first. My kid, you know, my kids, you know, come in a close second. um because, you know, just my personal opinion, the best thing you can do for kids is the best way to raise kids is to have a good relationship between mom and dad. um and so I can't give the kids something that I don't have. So if I'm not, you know, if I'm not treating my wife well, if I'm not loving my wife well, then I'm not going to be able to be a good dad to them. It just doesn't, at least in my experience of being a father, it just doesn't work like that. And so anyway, but kind and then, you know, obviously I have, you know, I have a pretty demanding career, especially well, that's a side
No,
topic,
no, no,
but
no. Go for it. That's
um
that's what I wanted to know because I'm like, you know, we started this podcast, you know, we both have individual channels, we've talked, we've streamed together, we've done all these things, and I'm like, I feel like I know you somewhat well for us meeting over the internet, you know, to the point where we want
mhm.
to do a podcast together. But I realize a lot of people here probably don't. And if we're doing a podcast about, you know, this gaming life, which I feel is all kind of encompassing, I feel like
Mhm.
they would want to know more about the people talking and how it, you know, how regular life affects our hobby and how our hobby affects what we call real life, you know?
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, that's fair. So, some you know, to make a long story short, basically what my job is I'm a financial controller for venture capitalists. So basically, what that means is, you know, I have, you know, there are guys who, you know, I have a group of guys that I work with, and they basically open up a whole different variety of businesses. So basically, you know, we own hotels, we own a real estate brokerage, we own a custom construction company, we own property management companies, one for long term, one for short term. Um, we own several housing groups. But you know, inside of those companies, for instance, our portfolio for our long-term management is about 150 properties,
You don't have
and
to, you
our
don't have to sell us on your company. What do you do there? Like, what is your job? Like, what for
I
this
handle all the money.
meaning what? You cook the books?
No, no, well, no, I don't have to. Um, no, so essentially, every penny that goes in and out of the operation that these venture capitalists want to open up, I handle. So if they want to open up a new business and
Hmm.
um, like we needed to raise $1.8 million worth of equity to get a $14 million loan to expand a hotel.
Okay.
And then just kind of the interactions with those banks, how they handle that controlled equity as far as releasing it to us to get the project moving. Um, as far as the beginning of that process, what that investment looks like, and is it going to be profitable? Is it worth, you know, is the juice worth the squeeze?
So
Um,
this is like a like. Do you do the research then, or do you just merely handle the finances going from point A to point B during the transaction?
no, I'm in there with the performas. I'm in there with the forecasts, and then I'm also in there in the operations too. So
So
I'm in
will you be doing a subset of video tutorials on how to skim off the top?
it. It's funny because my boss will actually make that joke. He'll always say, "Yeah, like yeah, you're stealing from me, aren't you?" And I just said, "Listen, here's the deal. If I'm stealing from you, you'll never know it until I'm long gone."
Nice. No. Cheers.
It's like it's like and like I asked, like, "Do you believe I'm good at my job?" He's like, "Well, I wouldn't, keep you on if I did." It's like if I'm good enough of my job to do the things you've asked me to do, I'm good enough at my job not to get caught.
That's some sound ass logic right there.
But yeah, no, I actually one of the things before I did gaming, I was thinking about doing a financial channel, and I
Mhm.
still want to do it. It's just
Yeah.
time is short.
Yeah. That is.
But anyway, yeah, so I'm just really involved in just like a whole bunch of different businesses. And why, opening a we're opening a restaurant, we're just doing a whole bunch of different stuff. Uber with go-karts.
Mhm. Hey, you got to
'Cause
keep
Uber
that
doesn't go
portfolio
everywhere.
diversified. Yeah, exactly. No, that is very
Um,
true. And Uber, depending on where you're at, could be like not only the only option, but could be the shittiest option.
Yeah. But yeah, so it's really just really kind of what my, a part of besides that is really just, you know, handling the egos and the eccentricities of the, multi millionaires that I have to deal with on a regular basis.
Yeah. Believe it or not, I have a little experience with that in my previous career in health and wellness. I worked in the financial district downtown Chicago, and a few of my clients had a lot of money, and that, man, did they love to talk about it. I was like, I mean, in not always like in a condescending way, but just kind of like I bought a Range Rover on Friday cash, and then I liked it so much my wife wanted one, so I bought another one on Saturday cash. It's like I would have advertised my services to you at the price point that I charge if I didn't know you had money.
Yeah, and it's funny. Yeah, I'm trying to think of what. So I'm in Charleston, which Charleston is loaded with money.
And just I got to tell you this, I don't know if I've ever said this to you. Every time you say Charleston, I hear Chew. Every
Chew?
time. Charleston Chew. Do you know what Charleston Chew is?
No,
Shut the fuck up. You don't know what
No.
Charleston Chew is?
no. I mean, but I'm terrible with names. It may be one of those things. If it's put in front of me, I know. But
Wow.
I gotta look it up. Hold on.
Yeah, I'm like, you live in Charleston and you don't know what a Charleston Chew is. No, it's, now I think about it though, it is kind of dated, as I am comparatively. I think I'm like close to 10 years older than you are. But Charleston Chew was like one of my favorite candies growing up.
Okay.
Do you know what I'm talking about?
Well, now that I'm looking at the wrapper, I recognize it.
So it's like this marshmallow treat covered in chocolate, and the best thing about them is when you put it in the freezer and you freeze that and you take it out, because the marshmallow is malted, it crackles in your mouth like glass, but it's like the best tasting glass you've ever had. I know it's like a weird, that's the only way
my
I can
mouth is
describe it,
bleeding,
right?
but it tastes good.
Well, it doesn't. It just like it shatters in your mouth like I would imagine glass would, but it's it's like sugar, so it instantaneously starts to like dissolve, and it tastes good, but it's cold. It's kind of like, anyway. Sorry. Every time
That's how Eskimos would kill wolves, right?
Yes. I actually I remember reading that.
Yeah.
But which is really fucked up. But
It's ingenious.
it is. That doesn't mean it's not fucked up though. It can be both things. Like, it is ingenious, but it's also like it's really fucked up. What was I talking? Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but just every time you say Charleston, I want to be like, chew. Like, sorry, go on. Anyway.
Well, no, so like you know, of owners that will like, or like some of my owners, like if they want me to go up to Greenville, they're like, they'll just say, "Hey, I really want, you know, can I fly you in my plane?" Or, you know, something like, or it's like, because they want to show it off, but really, it's not really the throwing, but it's more the not entitlement in a brash way, but just tell you so. I had this guy who and that's the thing. I think all like people, most people that are rich, um, all of them think that a lot of them think that they're special, or they're like they're one of a kind. But
Okay.
and in some places they are, but in Charleston they're not. You know, they're just, you know, you can't throw a rock without hitting someone who's worth at least, you know, $50 million.
In Charleston, North Carolina? I
Yeah.
didn't know they were known for that.
Yeah, Charleston, it's crazy money in Charleston.
Huh.
But yeah, I had this guy. Besides exchanging emails with him, I never met him face to face. Don't know what he looks like. Didn't know. He just came into my office, said, "Hey, I'm Will. I need you to do this, 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 and this." I was like, "Who are you?" It's like he said, and he just said, "I'm Will." I'm gonna omit his last name, but he's just like, I'm Will such and such. We've exchanged emails. Like, okay, like I need you to do this. Like, I don't think so. And it just involved me doling out money, and it was just like, I'm sorry, I'm not going to do that. It's like, I need you to do it. I'm like, man, I don't know who you are.
Right.
Like, and he just he just came into my office expecting me just to follow his instructions.
Right.
And eventually it's like, dude, this is a financial, like, we have bank account numbers. I have so many people's personal information. Like, you need to get out.
Yeah.
And he took it in stride. Like, he wasn't like offended and stormed off or anything. But I was like, dude, you can't be in here. Like, I have information in here that's worth hundreds of millions of dollars. You have to leave.
Right.
And it was just kind of, and he wasn't angry. He was just kind of taken aback.
Right.
But it was just the gumption to just kind of not storm in, but just kind of come into my office when he doesn't work there and start giving me instructions of what to do. And it's just like, dude, I don't know you.
Yeah.
And so it's just stuff like that. And like I said, he didn't get mad, or he didn't act entitled after I told him to go away.
Yeah.
And we obviously had a conversation afterwards, and he understood. There have been a couple times, and I think part of it's his personality, where he would try to instruct me the way that I run my accounting department.
Right.
And I was just, and to the point where my boss said, "Dude, just shut up." Like, he's really good at his job, and this is going to sound
no. And the thing,
horn tooting on myself, but there's not many people in the country that do what I do.
Yeah.
And so he was just like, "Man, just shut up." You just shut up. Which made me feel good. But
and I will say, like, and I'm not trying to be contrarian in any way, but I feel like when that sort of attitude is not unique to someone who is wealthy. I mean, I believe that if you are wealthy, you may be more inclined to be that way, but I feel like anyone with any sort of perceived amount of quote unquote power over another person can and do act like that. I mean, I'll give an example. So like you said, you do a job that very few people do. My wife is what they call an actuary, and less than 1% of the human population are actuaries. It's a very, very specific job that you need a very, very specific kind of talent or training to do.
I work with actuaries all the time.
Yeah. So she, I'm going to talk about this a little bit because I love my wife. She's amazing. She has a natural inclination, like she's naturally intelligent when it comes to critical thinking, math specifically. She double majored in math and economics and graduated magna cum laude, for both. And it was like, that's like, that in itself is such a rarity. And then for her to become an actuary, and she is now like 33 and already a manager. I mean, she works for like an international company, and she will be on these calls where people from all other countries at all different time zones come in to listen to her analysis for these multi-billion-dollar corporations that her company works for. And they give her team that she leads, and she's like, okay, I'm going to take all this metadata, I'm going to create this, hour and a half PowerPoint that basically takes all of this shit and like breaks it down. It'll take her like anywhere from like 2 months to like 8 months, depending on what it is, and then present it. And she will tell me, she's like, I had some jackass fresh out of college. He doesn't know what he's talking about. He frames the question in this way that somehow I have to present it to him. And I'm like, this part of the analysis doesn't even affect you. You should not even be asking this question. But people on an international call like that, they want to sound important. They want to feel like they have power. They want to feel like, hey, you explain this to me, or you do this for me. It's kind of that, I don't know. I feel like it's kind of like a universal, almost like a human attribute, I feel, when people are in any sort of position that even they perceive as having power, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and it's it's a balancing act of you there is an essence. So this where if they're giving you business, you do need them to an extent, even though you may be an expertise in what they're asking you to do, and they feel the desire to correct you or to just make their opinions known.
Yeah, that I think though might be different than the scenario we're talking about. That I do agree with, that like there's a certain almost etiquette, right, that you want to have with customers, even if they're irate, even if they don't understand, or they need something like spelled out for them.
Yeah.
Does that make sense, or is that not like
No, it does. It does. But that's really that's the tricky part of being the smartest person in the room.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that about myself. I'm just saying
No.
it sounds like your wife would be one of those people.
When she is giving the presentation that she took 6 months to create, I guarantee you she's the smartest person in the room.
She's the most well-informed person in the room.
Right.
And so when you are that, and you're put into that teaching role, which if she's trying to break down information, that's very much what she's doing. She's trying to teach this information to whoever she's talking to.
Right.
And man, with adults, it's so much more than kids. Like you have to balance egos, because your goal in that moment is to get information from point A to point B into that person's head.
Right.
Whoever they may be. And so, sometimes you just you have to, bob and weave around egos and stupid questions and all that to get that job done.
Constantly. So,
yeah.
One of the things, and I have to speak to this when it comes to adults, especially because, and there's a lot of science behind this, but I would have to like kind of review to repair, because I've read it, that the ability to receive information, depending on how you were brought up and how your education looked, kind of dictates how your ability to receive and disseminate and digest information as an adult. And so, like I said before the pandemic, I was hired for, I don't know if I should say it on stream, but like a large corporation to be, an educator for them in the health and wellness industry. And that's what I had been doing for like close to 20 years. And, one of the things that I didn't know that I hated so much until the pandemic hit and I switched careers is the constant repeating of the same basic scientific information about, you know, eating correctly, or not correctly, but like how eating impacts your weight, to the
Mm.
same people 2 to 3 times a week, month after month after month. And like, I truly do believe there, I don't remember who said this, but somebody said that, like, I want to say it was something like a Buddhist, or, you know, maybe it's on the Tao Te Ching that I read like years ago, but it basically equated to, people will not receive or accept information until they are ready to. And I've tried to remember that when I have to repeat things over and over and over again to someone who just doesn't want to believe that, you know?
Yeah, no, it's funny that you say so. My limited experience. I mean, I guess I think what I see, whether they're, and it doesn't matter whether they're really smart, successful people, or they're, they're doing more remedial tasks.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the people that are the easiest to work with are people that are humble, not people that think they know it all.
I agree.
Um, and so, and maybe that kind of plays into what you said. People won't listen or hear information until they're ready to hear it or whatever.
Yeah.
But what primes the brain for knowledge is humility. Because if you don't have humility, you already think you know it. You already think you know what you need to know,
Hmm.
and that's what stupid people think. Not stupid people.
No, I understand. Like, these are like very relative terms, because I'm like, how do you define humble? Like, how do you empirically track that, measure that? You know, like, what does that look like on a physiological scale, you know?
Well, if you're looking for as far as scientific measure tests,
Yes.
I don't know if you can necessarily measure in brave waves, but but you can measure it in response. And so, to me,
Okay.
you
Yeah,
know,
I would agree with that.
and so, everything isn't necessarily ones and zeros on a computer screen as far as measured tests.
Mm-hmm.
So, I know that one of the things that is so one of the things I did before what I'm doing now is I was a financial operations consultant. So if you've seen Office Space, the Bobs, that was my job. I was a Bob.
Nice.
Um,
Awesome.
yeah. So, and obviously people bring in Bob
Mm-hmm.
because something's not working. Uh, sorry, I'm just trying to read the comments in the chat. Um, and
Sorry, guys.
so
This is so. Let me stop you
this has
here. We're
nothing
not
to
we're not
do
going
with
to start.
gaming, but
Nothing to do with gaming. So tonight we were going to talk about some things that we still may get to, and I apologize because I am eating dinner really really late, so I'm going to mute my mic while we do this. But one of the things I wanted to talk about was that I wanted you guys to get to know Mike the way I know drummer Mike. You know, and I wanted you guys, when we go forward with this, to kind of have an idea, because we're going to be referencing things in our lives, and I think it's good to not have those be like an inside joke or something you don't understand going forward. And so I think it's important, when we talk about our opinions, where the genesis comes from, and through our experiences, you could probably start to tag from stream to stream, like why we feel the way we feel. Sorry, you're a Bob. Tell me about the Bob.
But one of the tactics, you're brought in to analyze a whole bunch of things, but one of those things is the employees. And I was actually having this conversation tonight with a friend of mine. And one of the tactics is you bring them in for an interview and you just act completely disinterested to the point of borderline rudeness. You ask them half-hearted questions, you're checking your phone, you're whispering to the Bob next to you, you're kind of giving off the impression you're not really listening, and you're not doing it to be a douche. You're doing it because you want to see how they react when their expectations are subverted. Because that happens in jobs all the time. And here's the thing, you can ask them direct questions in an interview, but 99% of what you're going to get is going to be BS. So you have to create circumstances in which will wring them out like a sponge, as I call it. So here's the thing, you know, a sponge, if you just put it on a table, whether it's dry or wet, it looks really similar. It's only when it's squeezed and twisted, do you know what really is in there? And so our goal as Bob is to squeeze and twist the sponge so we can see what comes out. Um,
That's kind of fucked
so
up. Sorry, I'm like, but that's really kind of fucked up.
Well, but here's the thing. I mean, it is, and it's calculate. And you can say, well, that's not treating people well, and that's true. But the way we say is, well, here's the thing: the employees aren't treating the employers well because they're not doing their job well. They're not doing what they've been hired to do because this company is suffering. Now, if it's the management's issue, we will tell them that because we don't have just these, you know, we don't just have these interviews with the kind of entry level guy. You know, we have these interviews with everyone, and to be honest, at least who I worked with was actually my wife's dad. Um, is we would be harder on upper management than we ever were on lower level because everything flows downhill, whether it's crap or gold. Um, and so if if when you're squeezing the sponge of upper management and it's is it clear water or is it black and nasty? If it's black and nasty, that's the stuff that's getting into your employees. That's the problem. It's the it's these people aren't being taught and managed well. um, or if it's it could be it very often is vice versa. It's not the manage sometimes the management's being too nice. Sometimes they're not, they're trying to, and this happens a lot of times. This happens actually a lot more than managers just being douchebags. It's you're trying so much to be liked that you want this family atmosphere, which is great, but here's the thing, this isn't your family. Like it's great that you want people to care. Take them out to lunch, buy lunch
Right,
for
right.
everybody, you know, do all that, you know, you lead from the front, don't lead from behind, you know, do all that sort of stuff. But the thing is, though, you do got to crack the whip at some point, or else people are going to walk over you because you may look at them as your family, but they probably don't look at you that way.
Right.
And your job is to perform, or your group to perform, and it's not performing. Um, and so a lot of times it's you need to be more stern and difficult, not less stern and difficult. So all that to say is one of the things that him and I would always look for when we would interview these specifically the managers, but also the employees, um, is when we squeeze that sponge, is any semblance of humility come out? Um, because here's the thing, I can teach stupid. Like I can teach someone that's stupid. I can also teach stupid. Just ask my wife. Um, I can't teach someone who's arrogant. It's just it doesn't work because here's the thing: to be able to get help, you have to see that you need help. Um, and arrogance just prevents you from seeing that you need help. Um,
It's
anyway,
funny that you said that. So, as I said before, like, you know, my career in the health and wellness industry was put to bed, at least for now, voluntarily due to the pandemic. Um, and I went and got my CDL commercial driver's license, which I had in college like 20 years ago. I didn't keep it because partially because of my ego. I'm like, well, I'm going to college. I'm going to school. I'm never going to be a truck driver again. And so here I
lo and
am
behold,
and a truck driver, and obviously the rules and regulations and everything from 20 years ago to now have changed drastically. And so I get this job. I'm 43 years old, and I'm upfront with the two people that I perceive are my managers. They don't have a manager role. They're just kind of there. They're dispatchers. They tell you where to go, what to do. And I tell them, like, hey, I'm brand new. They're like, yeah, we know. You'll learn everything you need to know here. I didn't learn shit, and I kept making these very costly mistakes that didn't need to be made. And I kept asking and asking and asking, saying, listen, you guys got to teach me. I'm open to this or whatever. Oh, we don't have time. We'll do it later. Oh, we don't have time. We'll do it. And I would work these like 11-hour, 12-hour shifts, 5 days a week, you know, fucking half days on the weekends, sometimes both Saturday and Sunday. And it was just like this grind. And I was like, you know, I'll give you an example. So truck drivers who run the 53-foot trucks, there are regulations on how much that truck can weigh. Because of the distribution of the weight on the wheels, it can affect how you are able to control the truck. Even on the most perfect pavement, if you have too much weight, so you got like you know, it's got 18 wheels, right? So you got what they call the steer wheels in the front, then you've got another pair of 2, 4, 6, 8 that the truck hooks up to the trailer, and then you've got another 8 back here, right? And so this one here, if there's too much weight on the front of the trailer, it'll actually lift up what they call your steer tires, negating your ability to fully steer the truck. And if that truck weighs maximum weight of 80,000 pounds, which you run a lot as a truck driver, that gets really dangerous really fucking fast. And all over the United States, they have these weigh stations. You've probably seen them that truck drivers have to go into. And they basically, you run over the scale that's underground, and it tells you how much weight you have on every pair of tires. And you're supposed to weigh these. You're supposed to know this before you go into the weigh station. So there are gas stations where you can pay like $12, they'll weigh it, and then you can actually move the tires so you are legal parameters, right? So you have like so much weight here, so much weight here, so much weight here. They gave me my first 80,000 pound, I think it was actually a little bit overweight, and it didn't tell me anything, but didn't tell me it was max weight, didn't tell me where I was going. I went up a fucking mountain pass up in Washington that I had never been on. And on these mountain passes, there's no fucking guardrail. It's just like a drop off into, you know, this ravine that's like several hundred feet. And I'm like, I've never done this route. They didn't tell me anything about it. I get to my first weigh station, and they're like, oh yeah, you're overweight. We're gonna have to give you a ticket for like $300. And I'm like, what? And anyway, it was this whole debacle. But basically, all they had to do was tell me, hey, you know, you're going to be running at max weight, move your fifth wheel or move the tires so they're here. Never did that. And I found out like 2 weeks before I quit that I asked one of the dispatchers a very basic question on how these trucks work. Because again, like I'm asking everybody, because I'm like, I don't know how this shit works. You know, I was trained on a truck that, you know, is like 30 years old, and then I get a Volvo that's all like mechanized and shit. I'm like, I don't know what half of this stuff does. And I found out that the dispatchers, neither one of them were truck drivers. At no point at the 6 months that I worked there before I quit did they ever tell me that. And they kept telling me that, like, and this is the thing that drove me nuts. They said, oh, you're going to have to figure it out for yourself. And I was like, I'm driving a truck that's anywhere between 40 and 80,000 pounds, and you want me to figure this shit on my own? And it's like that's I think what ultimately kind of broke me. And I was like, all right, that's it, I'm done. And it kind of, the whole story was like, speaks to this idea that management is such a crucial part of any company that it can really make or break, you know, whether or not that company not only has the employees, but has effective employees to make that company profitable. Anyway, sorry. Long kind of story. But...
No, I mean, you're right. No matter what industry you're in, I know one of the things that I kind of demand from managers is if you're too busy to teach, you're too busy. Yeah. Teaching is your number one job priority.
Absolutely.
If you can't teach, you can't be a manager. Because here's the thing. My goal, you know, as the financial controller, is to make sure there isn't one person who is indispensable. I know that sounds douchey.
No.
but the goal is we can't have someone could die in a car crash.
Right.
But the thing is, I say the same thing to my boss,
Right.
the owner of the company. It's like we need to make it so if you die tomorrow, like it'll suck. We'll go to the funeral and buy flowers and
Right,
all that
right,
stuff.
right.
But we gotta keep rolling.
Right.
Like we're not stopping. And to be honest, I'm the most guilty of that, because I just last year when my dad passed away unexpectedly, it was right back to back for with my vacation. So I was
Mm.
out for 10 days because of my dad passing, and then I was out for a week for vacation.
Right.
I needed a vacation.
Yeah.
So I was out for 2.5 weeks, and my first day back, my assistant came in. Well, his assistant came into my office and was just like, it was just so completely lost without you, which made me feel good, you know.
Sure.
But then he came in and said, "You can't leave that long again." And I'm like,
Right.
well, and in my head, I'm like, well, I want to take my wife to Europe.
Right,
Like
right,
I
right.
want to go do all these
Right.
things. So it's like someone needs to be able. No one can cover for me,
Right.
and that's a fail on my part.
Well, and
Oh, go ahead.
this is the discussion that I actually wanted to have that ties into the gaming industry and ties into this idea of perpetual monetary gain that is central to the capitalistic idea that is basically ingrained in us from day one because the way our society is set up, that money is everything, basically. You know, this idea that no matter what happens, whether you want a vacation, whether there's a death in the family, whether there's a pandemic, whether there's an insurrection at your fucking national capital, it doesn't matter. The money must flow. And I feel that like there has been a surgence of a lot of great developers leaving even some of the top franchises, whether it's BioWare or Call of Duty or whatever. And this is a topic that we originally wanted to talk about, was the flourishing of the indie developers and the indie games coming out. Specifically, we saw this at E3. Xbox is, you know, basically indie porn central, right? I mean, they are just, because they are now basically, I don't want to say absolving, merging PC and Xbox. It's no longer two ecosystems, right? In Microsoft's mind, in Xbox, multi-platform going forward, it's like cloud streaming. That's their inevitable goal. That's how they're going to, I'm not saying this is a good thing, but this is how they're going to create a monopoly, is they are going to, because like, I'm sorry, Stadia is fucking dead as dead. And I'm like, I know people, it's still technically going, but I'm like, in the long game, Microsoft and Xbox as a business is going to fucking dominate. And I'm a little scared they're going to create a monopoly on cloud stream gaming and whatnot going forward. I know Amazon will probably, you know, I know they'll come up with something or whatever. Sony will be on board. You know, they've already got their, the seeds of PS Now, so you can technically play God of War on PC and things like that. But it's this idea that kind of, you know, no matter what happens, no matter what's going on in your life, money is king. And a lot of these developers, these writers, these programmers, these, you know, directors are leaving these large companies because of that, and because of how big video games have become in the last 20 years. The demands of the worker have just grown exponentially. And the idea is that, well, if we pay you a little bit more now, it's worth it. And I know to a lot of people that sounds like a good thing, and we can debate, sure, that is, like, you should definitely, like, as you get better at your job, as you specialize, take up more responsibility, you get more money. Money, I don't care how much you have, you can't buy time with money, you know? And it's like, I've been reading a lot of these stories about how people miss the, you know, the raising of their children. They miss these moments, they miss family vacations, they miss all this stuff, or they just, they're burnt out because they're working 12, 13 hours a day, 6 days a week. And one day to recharge is like not enough, because then they have family obligations that they try to get to, all this stuff. But I do think that the idea that money reigns all, and that Call of Duty is a specific example, that it's grinding the developers down. It becomes like a rotating stock of new developers. They get in there, they grind them down, and once they get burnt out, they come out. Yeah, they have some knowledge, but they're like, I'm never going to work for a big game studio again. And so they create their own, they create these indie titles. They're happier, they're not making as much money, but there's a balance there. And that's something I wanted to kind of talk about, because I know for you, you have fundamentally a different a lens on it than I do when it comes to I don't know if it's capitalism in general, but money as a driving source in life. Am I accurate in that?
I mean, money isn't a driving source for my life personally.
Really? See, I got that. I
no.
got that impression. So, see,
No.
I was wrong.
So, and this is where, to kind of tie into what we're talking about previously, one of the reasons why Odin and I wanted to start a podcast is because him and I have drastically different ways of just viewing the world, which is great. But we're still able to have conversations and debates about it without, wanting to blow each other's brains out. And so
it's so fucked up that that's not the norm.
but just so he comes from a more liberal lens than I do. I come from a more conservative lens. But not just economically, but even socially, and even and he comes from a more when it comes to morality, a more atheistic point of view, where I would come from a more Judeo-Christian point of view. And one of the reasons why we wanted to start this podcast is because we can have these conversations and respect each other, still disagree, but have an honest conversation, say true things that may be hard, but at the end of the day, say, you know what? I don't agree, but they thought it, but just the other person, at least they've thought it through, and we may not agree with the things they use to back up what they think, but at least they think they have a leg to stand on, which is,
what's funny is that we've had so many conversations, but I can't think of a single one where we had such fundamentally different views on.
Oh, I can think of a lot.
Oh, okay. I don't have the best memory, so.
But anyway, so back to, so for me personally, money is not the driver for me. Money is a means to an end. Now, obviously, for my job, money is the driver, because I think here's the thing, and maybe it will give insight into some into why these big publishers act the way that they do. I don't know if anyone in here has seen the History Channel series, The Men Who Built America. It's about the robber barons.
Okay.
It's a fantastic documentary.
Sorry.
And the good thing about it is, for the most part, until the very end, they don't get political with it, that like Netflix history stuff likes to do. They just basically say, this is what happens, and that's all they do.
What? I'm sorry, what is it called?
The Men Who Built America.
Okay.
And so, and they have all of these CEOs basically to give commentary on kind of what normal day CEOs are thinking. So one of the reason why, you asked the question, I've seen people in Discord, I've heard you ask the question, don't they make enough money? That is a valid question if at the heart the purpose of money is to purchase things. That's not the purpose of money. Not for people who are rich. And I say this from personal experience, not because I'm rich, but because I deal with them all the time. They don't want to earn more money because they want more stuff. They want to earn more money because in their mind that is a system for keeping score.
Oh no, I agree with that 100%.
And so when you're looking at these publishers to try and kind of rein this back into video games, they're looking at it as a competitive game in which we're keeping score, not a how many houses does this CEO need?
Right.
That is not. And here, and this may ruffle some. Well, there's only 4 people watching, so it won't ruffle too many feathers. That's like the money to buy stuff. That's how poor people think.
Mm-hmm. Because that's their reality, right?
Because their reality is I want, and sometimes it's need, but a lot of times it's I want to buy stuff. I want to buy this type of car. I want to buy these type of shoes. I want to buy this type of, for us gamers, PC. I want to be able to buy any video game that I want. Essentially, what they're saying isn't I want this. What they're saying is I don't want to have to practice self-control. That's what they're actually saying. Now, if it's not a need,
I feel like that's very perceptive, though, because
but thing is, though, there are outward realities that tell you that.
True, but here's the thing. If I might, just hold on. I think we need to make some defines here on what poor is. So, like, I couldn't justify buying a $3,500 PC in my life, or I couldn't view justifying buying it until, this year, right? I'm 43. Mm-hmm. Like, there have been times in the past where I could have spent that money, and I've wanted a high-end gaming rig for quite a long time. Mm-hmm. But me being like, I wouldn't call myself poor. Like, when I think poor, I think someone who is forced to work 2 or 3, jobs, just to make ends meet because of their socioeconomic position in life, or, a whole multitude of different reasons, right? Mm-hmm. So that's what I think of when I say poor. I think what you're talking about when you apply self-control, that lack of self-control, I don't think is unique to poor people. I think that is, again, a very human characteristic that everyone, regardless of their income, has. If that makes sense.
No, it does, and you're absolutely right. So when I say poor, I'm more talking about a frame of mind than the number in your bank account. So there's a reason why that so many lottery winners go bankrupt. There's a reason for that. There's a reason why most people who have this, not consumerism as in like economic system, but who have this consumer as in I just consume. That's what I do. Mm-hmm. There's a reason why those people, no matter whether it's $1, $100,000, $1 million in their bank account, why the trajectory of their financial health is going down and not up. It's because their mentality is to consume. It's not to invest. And you make fun of me with the whole ROI thing. But that's when you're purchasing your $3,500 computer, I'm not saying because you do that, you're a poor person. That's not what I'm saying.
No.
What I'm saying is you are, whether you know it or not, and we're all doing this, we have this internal mental calculation. Is the money that I'm spending and what I'm getting out of it, is that worth the investment to me? So it may not necessarily be a monetary investment.
This is something we're going to disagree on right now. I don't think everybody has that internal calculation and monologue. That's the thing.
They don't have the monologue, but the equation doesn't change. It's just the equation gets diluted. So
the thing is, I don't think a lot of people even think of the equation though, I don't think that the math part comes into it for so many people. That's, I guess, my point is that, like, even for me, like, my parents, very conservative, they always told me to save, but they never explained why. They never taught me how to do a budget. They never taught me how credit cards work. And so when I got out of high school, and I moved out before my senior year. So I was already, finishing my last year of high school, paying rent, working almost a full-time job. But I did not understand how to budget and the reasons to have, this idea that when you make money, you don't want to spend it right away. For years, that is all I did. As soon as I got my paycheck and my rent was paid, every other penny, I was like, out the door. CDs, movies, fucking, like, because I'm like, I've never made that kind of money before, even though it was like $7 an hour or whatever. I'm like, my parents, they didn't do the whole allowance thing. Like, I was basically, this is a bit dramatic, but I'm like basically suffocated until the point I fucking moved out. I was like, I can do whatever the fuck I want. And literally I went from like one paradigm to the other. And I feel that like, that happens with a huge generation, and I'm not making judgments on this, but when you have two working parents, that have full-time jobs and, careers and have kids. And again, I'm not saying that this is a bad thing. I'm just saying that when you have that, there is a dynamic shift, I think, in your ability, depending on the parents, depending on the job, socioeconomic positions, all this stuff, to communicate and, teach what we would call life lessons that aren't taught in school. Because, especially now, I feel like a lot of school programs, when I first learned algebra, I think was in like 7th or 8th grade, when I taught karate for years. And I was meeting like 7-year-olds and 8-year-olds learning algebra. And I'm like, what the fuck is going on? And there's this like massive push, because kids are like sponges, and this has a double-edged sword, but I feel like a lot of schools are trying to cram as much as they possibly can in these higher education at younger ages. And we're missing a lot of the, what I hate the term common sense because it's a misnomer, but people would refer to things like a return on investment, or understanding the difference between having money and having wealth. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So when we're talking about that internal conversation, the internal conversation of, okay, I want to buy this $3,500 computer because I want to play on it. Okay. Well, how does this correlate with the rest of my life? How does purchasing this fit into the fact that I have all these other financial obligations? So that is a developed and mature inner monologue.
I agree.
Now, the people that don't have that, it's not that conversation doesn't happen. It's that it's that quick. It's, I want it, I buy it. They're still making the same calculation. There's just no thought behind it, because it's built on emotion. It's built on, and this is something that I can struggle with. It's, I love shiny buttons. Shiny buttons, I want it. Shiny buttons, give it to me. And so
what do you mean? Like cufflinks?
No. So back when my wife and I lived up in Maryland, and we had to buy a new refrigerator, and we were refrigerator shopping, I saw a smart refrigerator that I just had to have. Because it had a computer, it basically had a tablet built into it. I was like, I gotta have it.
Get out of here.
Yeah, and it was awesome. I still miss it. And as soon as this refrigerator breaks down, I'm going to go buy another one. And so here's again, my wife's not a spender. I remember, when we first were buying furniture for our first apartment, I saw a $125 coffee table that I liked. It was $125. She broke down crying in the middle of the store because of the sticker shock.
for $125.
Wow.
And it was just like, and she she sat on the couch and just started crying. She's gonna be embarrassed for me
No,
telling
no,
you
no,
this, but
no,
that's
no.
okay.
It's not.
But it was just kind of, at first I was like, and I grew up poor. Um, my dad split when I was 6, and my mom did not have a college degree because she got pregnant her freshman year of college, and so she went and worked for for the church that we went to, and as well as our church wanted to treat her as much as they could. It's a church. They're not going to pay
Right,
exceedingly well,
right.
um, as most nonprofits shouldn't,
Right.
in my opinion. But and so but even that, but even if from my poor mindset, where I had to start paying rent when I was 15, 16, something like that. Even that, just so it didn't take a lot for me to think that, it didn't take a lot of money for me to think it was a lot of money. But even in that moment, it's like, it's $125. But she's like, it's just a coffee table. Why is it $125? And it was just kind of like, what is happening right now?
So,
But so here's the thing. But here's the thing. Her sticker shock, which is a very common phrase. So if anyone goes through any financial counseling, you'll hear that term, sticker shock. And as you know, I do personal financial counseling, and I don't charge for it. I do it for free, just because, like you said, not enough people know what they're doing with money.
Yeah.
And so it's just kind of like, but thing is though, even in that moment, my wife was still doing that equation in her head, and it was freaking her the crap out. But the thing is, though, the person who says, I see shoes, I want shoes, I go put shoes on my credit card, and then turns around and says, I don't have any money for food. It's like, time out. Well, the thing is, though, that should have been a conversation you were having with yourself, in the shoe store, not in the grocery store. But the problem is, you saw, you wanted, you bought.
yes.
And that is no matter how much money is in your bank account. It doesn't matter if you have millions and millions of dollars or you're living paycheck to paycheck. That mentality is a poor person's mentality. That millionaire won't be a millionaire for long. And that person who's living paycheck to paycheck, who may want to get out of that rut, won't get out of that rut because there's no sense of, I can't spend everything that I have. And anyway, so, but kind of rewind. Let's try and connect this, to games. Is what these big publishers are doing is they're selling these developers these ideas of grandeur of, if we infuse this money into, you're so great, you're so creative, just imagine what you could do with our resources. I guarantee you, in every single pitch to buy a developer, that is in there. Every single one, without question.
I agree.
The problem is that once again, those developers they're having the same inner financial equation in their head as the person in the shoe store or the person in the car dealership. It's the same equation. They may be bigger numbers, but it's the same equation. And it's, think of all the things we could do with this money. And that's whether you're creating something or whether you're just wanting to create maybe just a retirement plan for yourself, whatever the case may be. That is a mindset that's going to lead you down a road of it's the law of diminishing returns, which is actually it's a law of thermodynamics. So it's not even a financial thing. That's why thermodynamic economics is becoming a bigger and bigger thing, because it's the law of diminishing returns.
If I may, I think these are two different scenarios, though. You got someone who wants something really bad, and I've been in this position, and I was that person who would buy something at the expense of food because I didn't, I was never taught how to budget properly. I didn't have impulse control. I didn't understand what being poor meant, what it looked like, because it looked, because I was, middle class. My idea of poor was only based on, my comparison to people who were less poor than me, right? So I never thought in my head I'm poor. And so that scenario of seeing something you really want and not having impulse control and throwing it on your credit card is, I think, a lot different than a publisher coming to a game developer with an idea and saying, I'm going to give you all of this money if we do this project together under my umbrella. I think that's, like, just financially, that's fundamentally different, don't you think?
Well, the concepts are the same.
How?
The concepts are the same because it's the same driving motive. It's the driving motive that the decisive factor is the money. And it may sound weird for a financial person to be saying this, but the decisive factor is never the money. It's the people in the system that is created.
What? Walk me through this.
Okay. So, if you go through any engineering class or anything like that, you put together this simple system and you can draw it out on a piece of paper. And, especially those of you who are in the, who are into mechanics. So, whether it's HVAC, plumbing, electrical, anything like that, if you create a closed system, which companies are built to be closed systems, because that diminishes the law of diminishing returns. But here's the thing: you have to put in something good to keep the good rotating. If you put in basically garbage in, garbage out.
Right. No. Okay.
And so, but the thing is, though, that's so in the terms of to bring it back to a game developer, and you're seeing this with BioWare because, and here's the symptom of it: people are leaving left and right. And so if you're in this company and you have this closed system that has been working for you, which BioWare did for a long time, so they now get absorbed into another system where their system doesn't go away, but it now has been attached to another system. So it's now BioWare is now more of a subsystem as opposed to the main system, which they became an EA. BioWare, for BioWare's sake, was no longer the driving system. EA was the driving system that was pumping EA, the EA sauce, the EA fluid through the system.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
So now, whatever BioWare had that was good, that system, this is part of flushing if you've ever flushed a radiator, this is what flushing a radiator is.
Yeah.
It has the more dense concentrated liquid in that system is going to flush out the less dense.
Right.
That's just whether it's a mechanical or system or any kind of system that you make. And so what made BioWare great was the fact that now EA has flushed the BioWare system with EA system. But here's the thing, and EA convinced them probably through, the pocketbook mainly, that their cache, that they could essentially connect systems and BioWare could keep its driving force system. But that's just not the way business works. That's not the way anything in life works, because nothing happens in a vacuum.
Sure. And I'm sorry. I'm very ignorant to obviously the knowledge that you have. I'm still having trouble connecting. I understand the idea that you're saying, and I actually have another anecdote that I want to put onto that for those health enthusiasts, which I know you are. We'll come back to that. But how are you connecting that as the same idea as the thought process of someone impulse buying something they can't really afford?
Um, it's the impulse because it's based on what you're selling. So what EA sold BioWare and probably what Microsoft sold Bethesda,
Mm-hmm.
was that the antidote to your system. So we'll use Bethesda as an example, just because we're both most familiar with Bethesda. And I don't know this for a fact. I'm just using it as an anecdote. One of Bethesda's main problems as a company is a lack of market saturation of your product. Now, you don't want to have oversaturation because then the market gets tired of you.
Right.
But you don't want it to be undersaturated, as in it takes 15 years in between titles. Because people will move on to other things. People will, like, as much as the Elder Scrolls is beloved, people will forget about the Elder Scrolls if it's 20 years before in between titles.
And it probably will be close to be that, honestly.
They will move on to other things. So, one of Bethesda's biggest problems was, if they're taking we're going to take as long as we can to make sure we get our games right. Let's say,
Okay.
Which is like, okay, that's fine, but you're going to lose a key component of what makes you money, and that's the fact that your market's going to dry up just because of a lack of, a lack of supply.
Sure. That's probably why
Microsoft
they remastered Skyrim, why they put out Fallout 76 in the state that it did.
Right. It's why Cyberpunk it is exactly why Cyberpunk came out when it did.
Right.
So Microsoft comes along and says, "Hey, we can get you to move along quicker with our resources." It's when money is the antidote is when there's the problem.
Okay, so now we're getting a bit of clearer picture, but I think we could still refine this idea that there is a fundamental difference, though, between a game developer going to a publisher and getting starry-eyed and saying, this is the answer to our problem, is the money from this publisher, I think is still fundamentally different than a person going and seeing a pair of shoes or a DVD or a pair of headsets that they really want. I think that the major fundamental difference is that in a consumeristic society, we look to consumer goods as a way of, filling a need that we have in ourselves that cannot be filled by consumeristic goods, if that makes sense.
Yeah. It's not an actual need; it's a perceived need.
It's
I'm with you.
Exactly.
I'm with you.
And in a lot of ways, that perceived need is an emotional issue, I would argue. I'm not a psychiatrist. This is just, I'm completely going off of anecdotal experience. So if anyone, listens to me say this, I understand that it's very hubris of me and that I'm very ignorant to psychology and whatnot. I'm not trying to diagnose anyone. But I do believe that, from my experience, from the swings that I had when it came to consumerism, a lot of it is emotional. That Sega Genesis, right? That little that new thing they put out, I played that once. I was so hyped for fucking months to get this thing. I paid it was like $80 for this thing. I fucking played it once. And now it sits on a shelf collecting dust. Absolutely an emotional impulse buy that is unnecessary. But it's one of those things that, we get, and I know people argue about this. Marketing is about emotional manipulation. It's about creating an emotional drive in someone, through all different types of advertisement to make you believe that you need this product, or this product is going to fulfill a hole inside of you that is probably emotionally driven, that needs more of an emotional response. But until then, buy a fucking Sega Genesis Mini.
Yeah. No, I completely agree with you. And really, to make an already kind of belabored point a little less belabored, is one of the this may surprise you to hear me these words come out of my mouth, but the problem with capitalism in America um, is that what breeds success is contentment. It's not want. And that's not a
Elaborate. I don't think I know
yeah, I
what
was
you
gonna say
mean by that.
that's not I mean I mean that can be kind of that can be moralistic if you want to think about it that way, but even from
Oh, I think
a
it is, absolutely.
economics but even from an economic science perspective, um, contentment is what resolves the inner turmoil.
Oh, content. I thought you said contempt. And I was
No,
like,
content.
I was like, content? What the?
No, no.
I am not Oh, contentment. Yes, absolutely. 100%. I believe contentment. Yes, because.
and
Oh, no, go ahead.
Mhm.
No, finish.
Well, I was saying but contentment is what drives informs consumers, because all of a sudden you realize let's go back to that inner
Mhm.
equation that you do in your head. You're able to differentiate a need from a want. I don't need this, but I want it. And because I'm able to because I'm content and I'm able to see that this is just a want and not a need, I'm able to take my time. I'm able to do research. Not only that, I am able to force as a consumer. Now this takes millions upon millions of consumers, not just one consumer, to then make a company work harder for your business.
Yes.
Um,
So, if I may interject with that,
yeah.
while I will toot my own horn and say that I do that, that itself is a skill that I had to learn and I constantly have to refine within myself daily. It's like a meditation. It's like I am an addict in recovery. And I don't mean that hyperbolically. I mean that literally. That and this all this shit that you see behind me is all relatively recent purchases. I mean, there's a few PlayStation 1 games in there. I cannot tell you the amount of money that I would consider that I have wasted on games I don't need, systems I don't need, accessories I don't need, all of that over my lifetime because of exactly what you just said, is that there were other aspects of my life that were, out of my perceived control that contributed directly to my daily stress in life,
Mhm.
where life was so overwhelming that the only thing that would calm me down, or the only thing that would make me feel like I have some sort of control, is literally picking up a controller. This was like a way of me taking back the lack of control I felt like I had in my life. And I think I've talked about this before. Like, I have no relationship with my parents, and I had a very strained relationship with them early on, and I had, like, really high anxiety as a kid. I was, emotionally out of it. I'm still I've taken I because of the pandemic, I haven't been properly diagnosed by a psychiatrist, but two therapists have already said, like, pretty sure you're autistic, big guy. And I was like, no, I'm not. And then I go and look up all this shit, and I've been researching it for a while, and I'm like, oh, fuck. And I'm like, it's like reading a Bible of my life. And not saying that, like, everybody is autistic who gets addicted to things, but I think it's one of those things where the reason we get addicted is there are emotional aspects of our lives that we are either conscious or unconscious of, outside of our control, that cause us stress, and we try to take that back. And sometimes, even if it means not buying food, we buy those pair of shoes instead. And that's where I disagree, where I would not categorize it as a poor person's mentality. I would categorize it more as someone who is hurting, someone who is in need of something other than those shoes. And the reason I say that is I think when you say, oh, that's a poor person's mentality, there's like a negative connotation to that. There's like almost like a like making them a pariah, and I don't think that is like I wouldn't categorize it as that, if that makes sense.
And I think here's the thing. And that's one of the things I think it's a shame that we've done in this country, and I think you get it from both sides of the political aisle, is that there's nothing morally wrong about being poor.
Right.
And that's where like it's like if someone says, yeah, I just I'm poor, but they're the other but just because they're poor doesn't mean that they're not financially healthy. Those are two drastically different things. You can be poor, live paycheck to paycheck, have trouble paying your bills, and still be financially healthy. That doesn't mean there aren't steps you need to take, but
sure.
So maybe that should be when I say poor, I mean not financially healthy. That's what I mean. So it's not tied to a number in a bank account. Because there are lots of people who, some through no fault of their own, some through many faults of their own, and they are just living with the consequences. Now they've changed since then, but you can change. That doesn't mean the consequences go away. My mom is a prime example, where she got pregnant her freshman year of college. It was not intended. Her and my dad got married, but eventually my dad split, and she didn't have a college degree, and she had two kids. She had me and my brother, and she didn't have much of a way to earn money. Now, especially getting pregnant and quitting school, those were her decisions.
Right.
But her being left by her husband wasn't her decision, and
right.
so she's been left in a bit where she doesn't really have much money. She doesn't have any retirement to speak of. She's probably going to work until the day that she drops. But the thing is, though, that was one of the things where I said, Mom, like, you're going to come live with me and Anne. And we're going to when we look for, and this was when we bought our first house, we're going to look for a house. It's going to have an in-law suite. It's going to have your very own space. You're going to have your own bedroom, your own bathroom, your own living space, and all that stuff. Because her being broke, it was through no fault. It was through no fault of her own. Now, that doesn't mean she doesn't make mistakes along the way that keeps her in the predicament that she's in.
Everybody does.
But everyone does. Yeah. But I think here's the similarity between the closed system of EA and BioWare, and here's where the connection is, because it's the driving motive is the same, and it's that lack of contentment. And I think one of the things that I think is another thing that is a shame in this country, because it's just economically untrue. From an economic science perspective, is that contentment is the death of ambition, and that's not true.
Who says that?
Oh, I hear it. I've heard it continuously. I've heard it in my economics classes. I've heard it.
Really?
I've heard it in lots of different places. And it's like, that is wrong. You can be ambitious and you can be content. That's one of the things that kind of tripped me up as far as when I look at the financial models of EA. So EA and Xbox is actually, they're functioning very similarly the way that Rome was built. And I don't know how many people here are familiar with the history of Rome, but basically how Rome sustained its economy was just under constant conquering of new nations and new territory and new resources.
Acquisition.
Okay.
That's what they call it today.
And so, but the thing is, though, they would just burn through it.
Right.
to the point to where they couldn't sustain themselves anymore, and the Goths and the Visigoths eventually just they became overextended, and they couldn't sustain anymore because they just consumed. That's all they did. They just consumed, and and here's and that's a problem. They did, you know, because eventually people don't conquer new territory, you know, whether it's gaming publishers or a country or whatever the case may be. You know, eventually that I'm going to call it selfish ambition. That it becomes a drug that you're addicted to.
Yes, and that's something I think we can talk about in another podcast, because I know we're going over time here. But growth for the sake of growth is the same mentality as cancer. And when has anyone ever said, "Oh, cancer, there's a good idea"?
Well, it's to be fair, it's the same mentality in every organism, and you know, yes, but I would to very now to the degree that it destroys its host. That's a different conversation.
Right.
And I mean, you're a lot more knowledgeable in biology than I am, but yeah, I think one of the thing that's going to kill gaming industry. I'm going to try and keep kind of bringing it back to games, because we've really done more life coaching than we have games. But what's going to it's I've heard people call it greed. I guess it depends on how you define greed. I would agree with that to some extent. But I'm just going to say the fact that games have become mainstream is what's going to kill games. Because, or it's not going to kill games, but is the thing that's going to hamper ingenuity. Because you can look at any successful gaming franchise, whether it's Dragon Age, whether it's Fallout, whether or Elder Scrolls or anything like that.
I bitch about that constantly. Lack of innovation in the biggest titles where you should have theoretically the most freedom.
Because you have two competing forces. You have the people who want to innovate, and you have the people who want things to be easy and no headaches. And so that was a prime problem. It's funny, you look at Fallout 4, it's one of the best selling games of all time, but it's also one of the most complained about games of all time.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, how do those two things coexist? Well, this is how they coexist.
Right.
Because you have a large contingent of people that usually, if people are content, they're quiet, usually, because they don't feel the need to complain. That they are like, this building system, is it quirky? Yes. Are there bugs? Yes. But no game has tried to do what Bethesda has done with mods on console, or with the way that you can change the world space. On your own, you can you can kind of hand make the world space. I mean, unless you're like Minecraft, but not in an RPG sense.
Right.
But the thing is, though, you'll have the other side that will complain of the building takes too long. I don't want to build. I just want to shoot stuff. And neither are right or wrong. But the thing is, though, you have Bethesda, who is essentially damned if they do and they're damned if they don't.
But I feel like that's almost any game, because, and I'm guilty of this, right? Social media, and we talked about this, I think, the last podcast, has taken away the work you have to put in, or what you used to have to do, and to complain to a company, right? You used to have to write a letter, you used to have to mail it, you had to, first draft, second draft, get the postage, go down to the post office, put in your mailbox, whatever it is. Social media has made your emotional reaction instantaneous, and so we don't really kind of critically look at it and digest it. And I do this on Twitter almost exclusively. I'm not ignorant to that. It's one of the things that I actually love about social media, but I do look back on it, and some of the things where I've had an emotional knee jerk when it comes to gaming, some of it I feel bad about, but other times I feel like this is exactly why social media was made. And I think that any game that comes out, regardless of how good it is or how innovative it is, I don't think it really matters because I've been on the forums for a lot of games, specifically ESO, obviously in the last 8 months, and it doesn't matter how good their update is. The ESO forums are filled with people just constantly pissed off and trying to break down every little aspect of the game that I do wonder. Now, obviously, the loudest voices in the room don't represent the majority, but I gotta wonder at what point do the people like that just get tired and like, I'm out of this game? And how much of the developers really take that feedback to heart, knowing that the loudest are not necessarily representative of the majority? Does that make sense? That was kind of like 5 questions in one. Okay.
No, it makes perfect sense. And this is, I mean, but that's what the financial department is the one that goes through the analytics of are people liking this or not? Because there are people who, I kid you not, will take Skyrim, will complain about Skyrim, but they have the Legendary Edition, they have the Special Edition, they have it on Xbox,
Right.
and they have it on PC,
Right.
and they have it on PlayStation. It's like you've bought the game 6 times, and all you do is complain about it. So I'm left to think, am I left to think of anything else besides the fact that, one, you're an idiot, but also too, it's just like, here's the thing. So whenever you hear a talking head come up from a really any industry, but video games that says power to the consumer or power to the community, what they're saying is power to the balance sheet, because that's how they tell.
Right.
That's the measuring stick.
Right.
And so it's like, you want Bethesda to change? Don't buy their crap. Oh, you've bought Skyrim 6 times, you bought Fallout twice, and you've played every game.
So here's the way I look at it, and this is the way I look at a lot of issues in life. And I do tend to, as you said, I tend to be a little bit more left of center, depending on the issue. But I look at it as a right brain, left brain thing. We have this in politics, unfortunately. We have very polarized politics in America. We've got the right, we got the left. The right is very conservative. Conservative is all about retaining structure, right? When you're conservative, you're trying to conserve the status quo. You want to mitigate risk. You don't want to change too much. The status quo is what keeps you kind of stable, right? Where liberalism is like, no, we got to go in this, untested, crazy ass direction, and then the conservatives, well, how are we going to do that? Like, I don't know. And I feel like this is kind of, to me, representative of left brain, right brain functionality, literally in our brains, where we have one side that's analytical and one side that's creative. And I feel like I almost see that in every single game is exactly what you said. You've got the investors in the game who have faith in this product, but they want a return on it. And so they're going to put their input in on data from the past that has said, this is what is sold. This is what has sold really, really well. But then you've got the developers, especially new ones, that are like, that's already been done. We need something different. And the melding of the two is exactly what I think is that, like, in Fallout 4, they took, I believe, the two best aspects of both sides and married them. Where, you still had this fun first-person shooter. They kept VATS. They kept the ideas that were successful in Fallout 3, and tried new ways, when it came to like the development, came to the narrative, came to the world building, came to how you leveled your character. They changed things. And I think that, they did it in a good way where it was like, it was innovative, but it wasn't too much change. It brought us some really cool ideas, but we also got some feedback that like, hey, we could probably improve this in the next game, which is going to be Starfield, right? So I do believe that Bethesda, of all companies up to this point, has been a really good marriage of left and right, where I feel other bigger game developers, so like taking Call of Duty for an example, they are more conservative with how they evolve the core gameplay mechanics. And I think that for them that's working for them, where they make really small changes as opposed to large ones, as opposed to, like you say, like The Witcher, right? The Witcher 1 to The Witcher 2 to The Witcher 3 were, I would say, very liberal. They completely changed how the world works from Witcher 1 to 2, and then it, like, fucking went to the, Mass Effect relay from 2 to 3. It was like, very rarely can companies do that and be successful. And to even further compare that, I've talked about this a lot. Dragon Age Origins, Mass Effect 1 were like brand new, completely IPs. They did things that other games didn't do. But then, both with Mass Effect 2 and Dragon Age 2, they streamlined it because, like, okay, now this is big. We need to sell more on this. We need to maximize our profitability. And I feel like they streamlined some of the best systems instead of growing them, if that makes sense.
No, it makes perfect sense. And but I that's the I don't always, and that's the thing when art meets business, is from art isn't always productive. It reminds me of that Jurassic Park line where what's his face, Malcolm, I forget, what's Jeff Goldblum's character says, we spent so long thinking whether thinking about whether we we didn't stop to think on whether we should. And I think a lot, and I think when art meets business, it's, well, we can change things. I wonder if we can do this. I wonder if we can push the envelope. In a lot of ways, that's good. You should think that way. But you also need to think, okay, we can. Should we? And not necessarily because is this what people are going to want?
But will it work within the game, the lore, the idea that they're going? Like, I understand that there are probably mechanics, hundreds of mechanics for every single game that comes out that we will never see because they got scrapped, somewhere in the development cycle. And I understand that. And I'm not a developer. I've never been on a developer team. I am literally looking at this as a post-consumeristic feedback loop of strictly my emotional, connection to the game and what I want to tell the developers, right? So yeah, there are so many elements that, like, if I was better educated and better understood how they went about that, I would probably be more empathetic, right? Because I think that's naturally what happens is when we have an emotional knee-jerk reaction to something, but then we learn the reasons behind how that decision came to be, we're like, oh shit, well, that kind of makes sense. And then you kind of a little bit more empathetic towards it,
Yeah, and it's having the maturity to understand, okay, what about this game is bad, or what about this game do I just not like? And I know we've talked about that all the time with Fallout 76. It's Fallout 76 is trash. It's garbage for this reason. It's garbage not because of the bugs. It's garbage because it's just holotapes and computer terminals. That doesn't make the game trash. It's just not your preference, which is fine. It doesn't have to be your preference. No one's telling you have to play it. But thinking through and saying, okay, the bugs is just bad. Like, you can blame Bethesda for the bugs. That's reasonable.
Sure.
You can, but you can't say, well, this is just bad with the lack of NPCs or with the just telling a story through environmental storytelling and holotapes and terminals. You say, that's not my preference. I don't like that, but that doesn't mean that Bethesda is now a trash company, or or that they just, it doesn't mean that. And that's the thing. So many people, they're not able to compartmentalize and think through it in that regard to say, okay, this part is bad and that goes over here, but this part is, it's just not my preference. And I'll put that over here. And it's like, okay, well, am I left with a game that I can enjoy or can I not?
And that's what I think when I go back to our original kind of discussion is that that I would equate that to emotional intelligence, right? And I know that's like kind of like a relatively new term that's thrown around a lot, but I do believe that is something. So in the 90s, that was something that started coming into the school system where I grew up in Minnesota. And I remember there was a class on emotional intelligence. Now, this is like my junior year, and I was like, and I read like the curriculum over it. It talked about like, what a warm fuzzy is and what a cold prickly is and identifying the difference. I'm like, oh, fucking easy credit, right? I'm like, I'm just gonna fucking sail through this class. There was no tests. There was just discussion as the final. I'm like, oh, I'm gonna sail through this. I still think about the different aspects that I learned and the people that I interacted in that class over 20 years later. I had no idea what kind of impact that would have and what kind of the rippling effect that, or I would actually say snowball effect that class had for me, as I got older and I started thinking about it and I started diving into that sort of idea that I don't think is taught enough. Now, I don't necessarily saying that it needs to be taught in schools, but I feel like it's something that at some point earlier than high school age, that needs to be approached. And I think it would help us on so many different levels.
Yeah, no, it's not, that's not the school's job. That's the parents' job. And that's just a massive failure by parents if they're not teaching their kids.
But what if they don't know? My parents didn't know what emotional intelligence was.
Oh yeah, it's
You
it's a generational problem.
Yeah.
The thing is though, it's not but really, when we call it emotional intelligence, we're just saying maturity, emotional maturity. And
Mm,
and
I
I
agree and disagree on that. I'm like,
well, when we're talking about when we're talking about control over your own emotions, which is what we were talking about with Fallout 76. Now, if you're
mhm.
talking about kind of extending that out to other people, well, that, to a certain extent, that is a skill that can be learned, absolutely. Um, but as far as, I mean, that in kind of, at least in the world that I live, it's just, we call it just learning when to doing the right thing in the right way at the right time.
So,
Um,
if I might, real quick there,
mhm.
you said in your world, right? And I think that's, now this is probably a longer discussion for another time, but again, our realities are very different. Even though you and I came from what I would argue is relative humble beginnings growing up in terms of socioeconomic status, our parents' generation, they were taught that emotional suppression, not emotional digestion, right? And I feel
Mhm.
like for our generation, we're kind of the first in terms of a nationwide or worldwide generation going, we need to deal with this, post World War II, post Vietnam, post economic depressions of, every 20 years, now might be every fucking 10 years. We need, I feel like we were the first, and it's growing, but it's a science that is still technically relatively new, even though people argue, Jung and Freud and whatnot. But I'm like, having
Yeah.
that intelligence for someone who is not an academic, I think is relatively new. And I think that's something that social media shows that we haven't figured out a way to teach people what that is. Because I'm like, I'm fucking 43 and I still go off on Twitter almost daily. Something I'm like, fuck you, bitch. I don't say fuck you, bitch. I try to make it a little bit more eloquent, but that's basically the gist of it, right? And the
Yeah.
same thing on forums for video games every day. And I'm just like, some days I'm just fucking scorched earth, and other days I'm like, God, I could not be a community manager for any gaming forum. I would just fucking blow my brains out with all the negativity that's on there. It just blows my mind.
Yeah. And that's where I don't, and that's where I think we're going to say, when I said in my world, I think maybe the vocabulary is different, but the concepts are the same.
I agree.
Um, and so yeah, when I say, doing things at the right time, or in the right way at the right time, I forget what the third one was.
I get what you're saying, but even those terms, though, the right way at the right time, the relative term is right, and then being able to identify when that time is,
Well, and that's
right?
one of the things that bugs me about modern day psychology is it doesn't treat people like people. It treats people like Buicks. Um,
What do you mean?
Meaning that the human brain is just a machine that needs to be fixed. Um, and to me, I feel like back to my kids, I do not and will not treat each kid the same.
Right.
And that's difficult to explain to my son, who has a huge, um, just a huge justice complex. Everything He's a very justice driven kid. Everything has
Your
to be
older son, I'm
fair.
assuming.
My older son,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, there was a time to the extent that I took him to home. He loves Home Depot for some reason. Took him to Home Depot. He did something I told him not to do. I told him when he got home he was going to be disciplined. 15-minute drive home. I forgot. 10 minutes after in the door, he reminded me to discipline him. And it was just like, I mean, my daughter is a lot more of a free spirit, to say the least. I'm not going to treat them the same because they're not the same.
Right. No.
They're different. They're different personalities. The human condition is, it's simple and it's complex at the same time. But there's too much minutia in it to kind of, I don't know.
No, I agree with you. So there's a difference between psychiatry and therapy, right? So I've been to psychiatrists before. I was accurately diagnosed as ADD/ADHD. They were kind of the same thing in the 80s, right? By psychiatrists, but I was never sent to a therapist. And when I went to a therapist, I didn't understand the differentiating as an adult. And so when I went to a therapist, I thought they were a psychiatrist, and they're like, no, it's two very different things. And when I went to a therapist, I was like, holy shit, this is so much different. And that's the thing, is like, they talk about what you say is the human condition. They're not there to medicate you, to diagnose you, to say, you need this drug, you need to not do this, and you need to do this, otherwise your world's going to fall apart, right? They're there to help you understand why you feel the way you do and try to figure out, like, okay, why do you feel that way? How do you feel?
Yeah.
What caused it? Why do you feel these sequence of events led this to you? And then you dig in, you pull on that, what I would argue is the Freudian thread, and figure out, okay, how long has this been going on? What kind of started it? How do you feel when you try to, exactly, right? I come home, and I'll tell my wife this. So I just got into this habit, basically, of trying to be a better husband and better communicator, right? I'm not the best. My dad was like a very stoic, just repress your emotions until they fucking build to the point where he explodes. So basically he was like a 10, and then he would shoot up to like 100 when he get pissed off. But that was like once every 2 months, and then he'd go back down, and he would just suppress it. Ironically, he died of a heart attack at 55. So this has been a driving force of me not to follow in those footsteps, because I do that same thing. I repress my emotions, and I get quiet, and I internalize everything. So like, even one thing I've been doing with my wife is I've been giving her like a rating. I'm coming home from work, I'm a 3 out of 10, or I'm an 8 out of 10. So she understands that when I come home and I'm in a certain emotional state, that it is not because of her. This is because of me, what happened in my day or whatever. I may want to talk about it, I may not. How did I get on this? There was a point I was trying to make. Oh, but the idea came from like going to therapy, not from psychiatry. This I came up with on my own as a way from therapy taught me, like, you have to figure out systems that work for you and work for the people in your life to manage these, manage your emotions and your interactions.
And part of
And yeah, I just think part is, especially this day and age, and you see it in the gaming community. You see it in all communities, but I think you especially see it in the gaming community, where every emotion I have is valid and true, and it's just like,
How is that
well, that's
not true though?
when I say valid and true, not in the sense that you're not having those emotions. You are having those emotions, so in that respect, they do exist.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but they exist, and I'm in the right of it, and
Meaning,
I am right. My emotion is right, is or correct. And I think that's like, I feel this. I feel Fallout 76 is trash, so therefore it is
okay,
trash.
that's a
And
clarification I was looking for.
oh,
Yeah,
okay, and it's just like, no, time out. No matter what it is, my dad was very much the same way. He was a suppressor until he kind of exploded. Um, and and I think one of the things that, if it's a bad day at work, or maybe the kids are just, they're having an extra special day, and and it's and I mean, I ask my son this question when he's very emotional, is, okay, we're having this emotion, I see that you're having this emotion, and I am recognizing you are having this emotion. Here's the question: should you be? Your sister is annoying you, and you're getting really mad. She keeps trying to play with your toys. She keeps trying to play with your Legos. You and you have asked her not to. Your father has asked her not to, and I will deal with that. But you're getting disproportionately mad to the situation. So, son, one of the things you need to ask yourself is, yes, I am feeling this. Should I be feeling this? Or is this feeling proportionate to what is going on? Um, and if the answer is no, and that's the thing, his sister doesn't force him to get angry. It's just revealing something that's already there. It doesn't originate with her, it originates with him. And that's where I think that we get these confusion about emotions, is my emotions are originating from out there, which is forcing me to do this. Now, I do think there are external factors that give you a predisposition towards certain emotions, such as if you're brought up in a house with a stoicist, you yourself are going to be stoic. That is going to be your predisposition. Just like if you know your father, your grandfather, your great grandfather was an alcoholic, you may want to avoid alcohol because
Yeah.
you have a predisposition towards being addicted to alcohol. Same thing with anger, or suppression, or whatever the case may be.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but the thing is, though, I may have a predisposition towards that, but I'm still responsible for my emotions. If And I think that's where I have an issue. Now, I've never been to a therapist, but I think that's where, at least, the psychology courses that I've taken has been, you're this way because of this outside force. And it's just like, timeout. No, you are predisposed to be this because of an outside force. Absolutely. But you know, Sam, that's my son's name. Maddie isn't making you angry. You are angry, and Maddie is bringing it out of you. And she shouldn't be doing that, and Daddy will deal with that. But you don't. But the thing is, though, she's not making you anything. It's originating with you. It's not originating with her. But the thing is, though, that I feel like that's inverted in our culture at large, especially in the political realm, but definitely in the in video games as well. When people will unfriend people because they have different opinions on video game, or they say something that makes them mad. It's what was this line in one of my son's books that we read him from nighttime? Is like, there's no such thing as annoying people, just annoyed people. um and that's it kind of, it brings the point that your emotion does not originate someplace else. It originates with you, and you're not this way because of this. You're this way because of you. Like your parents, your grandparents aren't the foundation of the problem. That doesn't mean that they don't contribute to it. But you this is going to sound really blunt, but I'm the problem. If I come home and blow up at my wife because I had a bad day at work, did she do something that may have annoyed me? Yeah, maybe, but she's not the problem. I'm the problem. Because I was not able to in the car ride home would say, okay, this really pissed me off at work. It's really making me mad.
But right
Okay.
there, you just contradicted yourself.
No.
This pissed me off.
Yeah.
So hold on a second here. Now hold on. I
There's
know
the
I'm
second
interrupting.
question.
it.
You
There's
missed the
right.
second question.
No. I understand the second question, but my argument where I was going to say I disagree with you is that there are no annoying people. My wife will tell you that is so fundamentally not true. I can be so fucking annoying. And I'm sure anyone who has read my Twitter feed or who has ever watched a stream with me, I can be fucking annoying. Now, when someone has an emotional response to something, there are a multitude of factors on why we have that response. That response is not controlled by us. There's no way for us to regulate our emotions in a preemptive way. It's like that line from Pulp Fiction, like, you can tell me whatever you want to tell me, and if I become offended by no fault of my own, I become a liar because I told you I'm not going to get offended. There's no way for you to do that. Now, I do agree that once
What you
have,
do with that is what's important.
Okay, that's where I wanted, like, the clarification is that, like, people will get annoyed. I get annoyed, from shit online. I get annoyed at myself because I'm like, I shouldn't click on this, but I just did, and now I'm in the first paragraph, and I'm like, what a fucking how can someone be so goddamn fucking stupid? It pisses me off that they're so and then I'm like, this has nothing to do with me. This isn't even in my realm. I don't even fucking care. This doesn't affect me at all. I am allowing myself to become upset. I am becoming my own conduit. And I think that's where you and I agree, where processing that emotion, recognizing it first, and then processing, that's a skill that you are teaching your son that I don't think that is a relatively new thing when it comes to society. And I don't think that's specific to America. I think that's like a humanistic thing where that's, recognizing how, I think we can look at history and be like, this is new. Like, kind of in terms of a mass scale of going, okay, this is how I felt. I need to recognize it. I need to understand and be in the moment. And I know this is kind of Buddhist, but like, be there for my emotion, recognize it, feel it, be in it. But then you have to process it.
Oh yeah, well, that's a theme through. Many world religions. I don't know much about Buddhism. Buddhism may be
you
one
are
of them.
I love. I've actually read a lot of different religions. I'm very rusty on. That was one of my college passions, was religion. You are absolutely correct. That is a theme throughout religions or any sort of ism, really, when it comes to a transcendental state, if you will.
But yeah, I agree. So yes, I will agree now I think you can train your brain to not be so easily swayed towards an emotion in the moment.
Absolutely.
But going back to my son, my main issue with him isn't that him getting annoyed at his sister. It's no, that annoyance is now causing you to scream at your sister.
Right.
We have a problem.
Yep.
And so here's the thing, son, is now not only is she's in trouble because she's doing what I have instructed her not to do, and that's a problem. She needs to respect authority. But you're now in trouble because you're not taking that emotion, you're not taking that thought captive in your mind and dealing with it.
Right.
And that's something that you need to do, or life is going to go very poorly for you. But the thing is, though, that's in social media, and I think that's what I mean when I say every emotion is validated, meaning
you're having this emotion and it's a right and good and true emotion. And it's like, most of my emotions are crap. Like, most of
Well,
my emotions are wrong.
uh,
The initial
mm,
emotion, not the after I think about it.
okay, yeah.
Yeah, it's the most of my, we'll just say, knee jerk reactions
Uh-huh.
are wrong. It's only when I stop and say, okay, this is my knee jerk reaction. Now let me think about it. That's why whenever my wife asks me for something, or to do something, or really to have any sort of in-depth conversation, it's, you want to talk about this topic, give me an overview, let me process and think, then we'll talk. Because I don't want to have a knee-jerk reaction with her, because that's not productive.
Right, but here's the thing, and and again, I'm being very egotistical in this. I'm being very judgmental, that I think the conduit of social media, especially when it comes to video games, because video games are like any other source of media, whether it's a film, whether it's a book, whether it's art, a painting or a poem, it elicits an emotional response. And I do feel that like the people who knee jerk the most on social media, to the point of detriment, to the point of being derogatory, to the point of being obsessive about their negativity, they don't have anyone in their life that is hearing them, that is giving what you give to your wife. What I try to give to my wife, what my wife tries to give to me, is that validation. And I think you're right in that I do believe that their emotion is valid. What I don't agree with is when you become so belligerent and focused on something that all you're looking for is attention, and that attention actually gives you validation, but even negative attention will get you that, and that I think becomes like the reoccurring theme. It becomes like the downward spiral for a lot of people on social media.
Yeah, no, I agree, because it seems like people aren't happy unless they're complaining about something. And that's
There's a lot of
just,
that, yeah. But I do.
and it's just like, when did complaining become a virtue? Complaining is not attractive in
when
any sense of the word.
when we are given a platform,
uh,
you look at anything, like look at reviews on Amazon. Once the internet became up, right, like once it went online, it is accessible to anyone. No random person can go on the news. No random person is going to, get into office and go on rants on TV or in Congress or whatever. Social media gives every single person that logs on a power that was not given to them at any point in history before now. And I think that, and we can tie this back to your lottery. When someone lives paycheck and paycheck and then wins the lottery, they are given this mass amount of money, and all they want to do is spend. They don't know how to manage that. I think the same thing is
mhm.
true, especially with video games, because they are a form of art and they do elicit emotion. That when you get on a platform and you can, to a certain extent, say whatever you want to say, that is a form of power that most people, especially myself, didn't have, right? Like, I, social media, like 3 years ago, I finally got it. I didn't have it. I didn't know what fucking Discord was until, DeBella and Haven set it up for me after I created my channel. I wasn't on Twitter until they basically talked me into it. I
Mhm.
mean, I was on Facebook, and I'm like, I barely logged on, and I feel like now with the anonymity too, it could be someone who's going off that has a profile that says they're like 31. They could be 10. They could be 13.
Yeah.
Like, you just don't know, and that's a problem. And it could be someone just getting their jollies off because they love making people mad. Like, I don't know. There's just
Yeah.
like, there's so much to it. It's hard to digest day to day.
Well, it's because I mean, I think the correct is, at least just from my limited estimation, it's that we're convinced that our emotions, that
Mm-hmm.
we're basically good. And that's just one of those things that it's just, and if I wasn't convinced of that, you know, before I had kids. I was definitely convinced of it after I had kids. Because kids, they're cute and they're lovable, but man, they're terrible. And this is what I mean. Like, I didn't have to teach my son to get angry. I didn't have to teach my daughter to be selfish. I didn't
Mhm.
have to teach my 1-year-old son. He loves to hit. He loves to. He has started biting.
Mhm.
Um, you know, and he's started to try and take toys from his older siblings.
Mhm.
You don't have to teach a kid to take a toy. You have to teach a kid to share. You
Right.
don't have to teach a kid to be angry. You have to teach a kid to be patient. You don't have to teach them bad
Right. Right.
things.
Right. Right.
It's almost like they instinctively know it.
Right. They
Um,
do.
but they do.
Right.
And but what you do have to teach, you have to teach them to respect authority.
Right. So
You have to teach them to have emotional intelligence, or you know what,
right.
I would
Right.
just
Right.
call it wisdom.
Right.
But
Right.
you have to teach them those things. You have to teach them a work ethic. You know, but you don't have to teach kids to be lazy. They'll
Right.
you know, that doesn't take any work at all. But that's where it's like but people have been convinced, especially this day and age, that no, people to their core are good. It's like, you've never been around a toddler. Go spend some time with some toddlers.
And
And,
yeah, and
um,
you and I think agree on this. I'm a misanthrope. I think humanity's a fucking blight on this planet. Like that's one of the major reasons why I don't want to propagate. But no, I agree with you. I don't think humans are intrinsically good, and I think human
that's what's
history
preached to them.
and I think that's bullshit. I think human history flies, and not even ancient history. I mean, look at the last fucking 20, 30, 40. I mean, like, it doesn't matter. You can pick up a paper tomorrow in some, not even some, in a lot of countries, including ours, you're going to find a news story that shows how fucking rotten people are and how selfish and greedy. No, I agree with you 100%. That we have to teach people to be good, not that they are intrinsically good. No.
Yeah, but pop psychologism. So that's not the science of psychology. Pop
Mhm.
psychologism is like Cosmo crap.
I've never been exposed to it, so I can't really comment.
But it's that. Yeah, it's that your your emotions are good and they're valid, and you should have the reaction that you're having, and you're completely justified in everything that you're feeling, and all that. And it's just like that is that you're teaching. You know, we wonder why people that have differing viewpoints can't have a logical conversation without getting pissed off. It's because they're unable to. They think that they're intrinsically right and good.
See,
And
so okay, I think there's a separation between good and right. So
because it's what I'm feeling. So if I'm feeling it, I must be right.
Yeah, no.
And
there's
that's that subjectivism. What's right for you isn't right for me. What's wrong for
Right.
me isn't necessarily wrong for you. And it's just like, no, there are laws put in place that are universal, that apply to everyone.
Right.
Like it's not up for debate. And so it's like, well, I understand that, and you know, I have run into this doing financial counseling. I understand that handling money the way that you say, that's what's right for you, but that's not what's right for me. And it's just like, what?
Okay, so
like, I've heard that.
Yeah.
And it's ridiculous. It's like, no. There is a right way to handle money, and there's a wrong way to handle money. Like it's now your goals could be different.
Right.
And you know what your goals are important. But you're obviously calling me, having me sit with you, because your goal isn't the trajectory that you're on. So that's why you've even come, why you've contacted me to help you. But it's just like, no, there is if you want financial peace of mind, which that's the way that at least I put it.
Right.
It's these are the steps that you must do.
Yeah.
Well, that's just your opinion. I've heard this,
dude.
and it's just
no,
like, no,
same
it's
things
not
in
my
health.
opinion.
No, I'm the same way. So like, I'm going to give you some free advice right now. If you are looking to lose weight, right, your total body mass, it is very simple. It's calories in versus calories out. People will deny this fact up and down and be like, no, it's this diet or this exercise. And I'm like, no, it is calories in versus calories out, like a bank account. There is no denying it. There's no, there's no bargaining, right? There's no negotiation. Like, clients would ask me, they'd be like, oh, you know what, I really want to go out and I just want to get hammered tomorrow. I mean, I had a hard week, I really want to have a pizza, can I do that? I'm like, yeah, you can. I'm not going to tell you how to live, but if you do that all fucking weekend, I can't help you if you gain 3 pounds by Monday. There's nothing I can do about that, you know? And it's like if you only make $2,000 a month but your bills are $2,100 a month, there's no magic that you can spin. You are creating a deficit, right? Like you're going in the hole. There's whether it's your opinion or not, there's a fact to that. I think though, when it comes to the psychology side, and I'm not saying this to be derogatory towards you, but you and I are specialists in 2 different areas and neither are psychology. And so I would argue that, and this is only because I've been to a therapist, is that there is this idea that the emotions you're feeling are your emotions and they are accurate in the moment. You need to own them, and that there's nothing wrong with having those emotions. But again, you got to make that separation and then go, okay, how are you going to process and deal with them after that point? Does that make sense? So I feel like we actually agree more than we disagree, but I do feel that there is a power in the way that we word things, that people interpret them. They interpret that words, you know, you can say one thing like earlier when you were saying poor, the way you said it, I interpreted it with negative connotation, which a lot of people I know do, even though that wasn't your intention. Right.
Well, and I don't see poor as a negative connotation.
Right. And but that's not. But immediately, because that is what I hear in my life, that poor is looked down on. That I have that initial emotional reaction. Now, I recognized it when you said that. I didn't go, you fucking arrogant, aristocratic dick. Right? I didn't like go off on that. I was like, I wanted to understand what that meant. And that's why I asked for clarification. And I think that's a key component that you were talking about that is missing. And I think we both agree on that is something that is not taught. And it definitely, when it comes to, again, a platform of gaming, social media, conversation in this virtual world where anonymity is king, you know, in a piece of art that elicits emotion, it's just a fucking perfect maelstrom that I do agree with you that it feeds more negative than positive.
I agree. I think it does. But it's 11:15.
Fuck, man, yeah, dude, it's been like almost 2.5 hours. Dude. I'm sorry, this has just been awesome.
No, it's been a great conversation. We haven't talked much about games, but that's okay. It's been a lot of fun.
I'm okay with having these, you know, once in a while where, you know, talk about other things. It's cool.
But yeah, no, I mean, I think that I think as far as the gaming industry is concerned, the consumer would be best served to approach things from a little more emotionally stable frame of mind.
I agree.
Than a going from a 2 to a 10, from a 2 to a 10, from a 2 to a 10. It's like, no, stay between a 4 and a 6 and you'll be good.
Yeah.
But I need to get going. For those of you that stuck around, we appreciate. We'll dive more into gaming.
We'll get into more gaming next week. And I thank you. This is more like an embellishment on my side because I really I did want to show a side of you in particular, but hopefully a side of us right when we start this channel. So, you know, as we grow and as we do more episodes and as we try different things, people have a little bit better understanding and maybe a baseline of comparison to see how, and it'd be interesting for us to look back and be like, how have we grown through this? You know, what has changed in our perceptions, you know, like 3 months or a year or 3 years down the road? Like, I don't know. I just thought it would be fun. I feel like it was. I mean, we went fucking 2 hours and it doesn't feel like that.
Yeah, I mean, it was fun for us. I
Yeah.
can't speak the same
Yeah,
for
all right.
everyone else out there, but
Whatever.
it was fun for us.
Yeah.
Um,
Go to bed, man.
Yeah, well, you got to end the stream.
All right.
You're in
That's
the
right.
driver's
Sorry.
seat.
So anyway, thank you guys for watching. As always, please subscribe. We have a Twitter up. Exasperated Gentleman here. He, you know, he's the guy who's doing all the modded streams and whatnot. He's got Oblivion, he's got Skyrim, he's got Fallout 4, he's got Kingdom Come Deliverance. Please go and subscribe and click that bell button so when he goes live, you will get notified so you can catch it. Ask him questions, discuss some things like that. Don't worry about my channel. I'm still trying to figure out what the fuck I'm doing. So anyway, thank you guys for watching as always, and hopefully we'll see you next week.